The late afternoon sun burned low and angry over Maple Lane when I heard her voice tremble through my open window. Small, polite, but cracking on the second no. Two shadows stood too close on her porch. They leaned in. She stepped back. My blood turned hot in an instant. Those men had no idea they'd just chosen the one house on this street I would burn the world down to protect. Many years ago, my wife and I moved into a quiet, tree-lined street where time seemed to have paused somewhere in the Eisenhower years. Every house on the block had been built in the early 1950s, and every one still belonged to the same people who'd signed the original deeds. Our neighbors were all in their late 70s and 80s, kind, proud, slowing down but never complaining. We were the youngest by decades, so naturally, we became the unofficial caretakers, hauling garbage cans back from the curb on stormy mornings, tightening loose porch railings, clearing leaves from gutters before the autumn rains turned them into dams. The street felt like a sanctuary until the salespeople arrived. They came in waves. Vacuum cleaner evangelists, overpriced magazine bundles, miracle kitchen gadgets nobody needed. Every third house had a polite, no soliciting plaque screwed beside the doorbell, but those signs might as well have been written in invisible ink. The men, and it was almost always men, would smile too wide, talk too fast, lean too close. I started polite, then curt. Then I stopped opening the door at all. But the anger kept building, slow and acidic. Every ignored sign another match struck against my patience. One blistering Saturday, the kind where the air shimmers and cicadas scream, two of them appeared at the far end of the block. Cheap suits, clipboards, that rehearsed enthusiasm that sets your teeth on edge. I watched from my front porch as they worked their way down, house after house, getting shorter no's and slammed doors. When they reached mine, I stepped out before they could knock. I didn't shout, not yet. I simply pointed at the sign 6 inches from their faces and said, low and clear, "It says no soliciting. That includes you." The taller one laughed, actually laughed, and muttered something about how a little conversation never hurt anybody. The shorter one smirked, eyes flicking past me toward the next porch. My pulse kicked up. I stepped closer. "I'm not asking," I said. "I'm telling you. Leave. Now." They exchanged a look, the kind that says, "We've dealt with this guy before," then turned away with exaggerated slowness, like I was the unreasonable one. I stood there breathing hard, fists clenched, watching them cross the lawn to Mrs. Delaney's house. Mrs. Delaney, 83, barely 5 feet tall, widowed 16 years, baked shortbread for the whole street every Christmas, and always slipped an extra tin to our porch with the note that just said, "For the helpers." My favorite person on Maple Lane. I heard her screen door creak open, then her voice, thin, polite, but firm. "No, thank you. I'm not interested." They didn't move. She repeated it. "No, thank you." The taller one started his pitch anyway, louder, faster, stepping onto the welcome mat she'd swept that morning. My window was open. I heard every word. I heard the tiny tremor when she said, for the third time, "Please leave." Something snapped inside me. Clean, cold, final. I leaned out the window and called across the narrow strip of grass that separated our houses. She said no. 3 times. You deaf?" The shorter one spun toward me. "Mind your own damn business, pal." I was already moving. The screen door banged behind me so hard the spring whined. I crossed my yard in 6 strides, boots loud on the concrete path. By the time I reached Mrs. Delaney's porch, they had turned to face me, clipboards half raised like shields. I stopped at the bottom step, looked up at them, and let every ounce of the fury I'd swallowed for months pour into my voice. "Listen very carefully," I said, each word deliberate. "This woman said no. That word has meaning. It ends the conversation. You don't get to talk over it, around it, or through it. You don't get to make her repeat herself. You don't get to decide what she means. She said no. So you leave. Right now." The taller one opened his mouth. I cut him off. "And if either of you opens your mouth again on this porch, I will make sure every neighbor on this street knows exactly what kind of men you are." Silence. Thick, electric silence. Mrs. Delaney stood behind the screen, small hands knotted together, eyes wide. I gave her the smallest nod. "I've got you." Then turned back to them. "Sidewalk," I said, pointing. "Now." They hesitated. I took 1 step up. They moved. They shuffled down the porch steps, shoulders stiff, clipboards clutched like lifelines. I didn't follow immediately. I waited until their shoes hit the concrete walkway, then turned to Mrs. Delaney. Through the screen, her face was pale, but her eyes shone with something like gratitude mixed with embarrassment. "You okay?" I asked softly. She nodded once, small and quick. "Thank you, dear. They wouldn't stop." "I know." My voice dropped lower. "They won't bother you again, I promise." She gave me that tiny, tremulous smile she always saved for when we brought her groceries or fixed her mailbox. Then she closed the inner door gently, the lock clicking like a period at the end of their visit. I turned. The 2 men were already halfway to the next house, the Miller's place. They kept glancing back, expecting me to disappear back inside. When they saw me still standing there, watching, the taller one muttered something I couldn't hear. The shorter one flipped me off behind his back, quick and cowardly. That did it. I started walking. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Boots deliberate on the sidewalk, hands loose at my sides, but ready. They reached the Miller's porch. Old Mr. Miller opened the door before they could knock. He'd been watching from his living room window, same as half the street probably was by now. "No thank you," Mr. Miller said, voice gravelly but firm. Door started closing. The salesmen hesitated, looked over their shoulders, saw me closing the distance, maybe 30 yards back, eyes locked on them. They moved on. I followed. House after house, porch after porch. Every time one of the elderly residents cracked the door, gave a polite refusal, the men tried to push, a little less forcefully each time, their voices dropping, their smiles thinning. And every time I was there, visible, silent, a shadow on the sidewalk that never quite went away. At the Hendersons, they got a flat, "not interested," and the door shut in their faces before they finished the first sentence. The taller one spun toward me, face red. "You gonna follow us all day, man? This is harassment." I stopped 10 feet away, smiled, not friendly. "Nope, just making sure everyone gets heard. You knock, they say no, you leave. Simple." He took a step toward me. I didn't move, just held his gaze until he looked away first. The shorter one tugged his sleeve. "Come on, let's go." They crossed to the next house. I followed. By the time we reached the end of Maple Lane, 12 houses, 11 refusals, their shoulders were slumped, their pitches reduced to mumbles. Sweat darkened their shirts in wide patches. The clipboards hung forgotten at their sides. No more smirks, no more muttered insults. Just two men who looked smaller than when they'd started. At the corner, where the sidewalk met the cross street, they finally stopped, turned, looked at me. I stopped too. 30 feet of hot, empty pavement between us. The taller one spoke first, voice hoarse. "We're leaving. Happy now?" I tilted my head. "I will be when you're off this block. And if you ever come back..." I let the sentence hang, unfinished. Let the weight of it settle. They didn't answer. Just turned and walked faster toward the main road, disappearing around the bend without another glance. I stood there a long minute, letting the cicadas fill the silence. My heart was still hammering, but the anger had cooled into something steadier, something satisfied. I walked back slowly. Every porch light seemed a little brighter. Every curtain twitched as I passed. Mrs. Delaney's shortbread tin was already waiting on my steps when I got home, fresh, still warm, with the same note in her careful handwriting. For the helpers. I smiled. Really smiled. Years have passed. The streets changed some. A few new families, a few more empty nests. But every time I see a no soliciting sign ignored, or hear a too loud pitch through an open window, I remember that Saturday. I remember the way those men shrank smaller with every step I took behind them. And yeah, it still makes me smile.